She knew. She had known for a long time. Her friends had told her. Her sister had told her. A therapist she saw twice had told her. The evidence was not hidden. It was everywhere, in every argument that ended with her apologizing for things she hadn't done, in every good week that was followed by 2 bad ones, in the way she had slowly stopped being the person she was before this relationship began. She knew it was damaging her, and she stayed. Not because she was weak, not because she was naive, not because she didn't have options or couldn't see what was happening to her. She stayed because something inside her, something that had nothing to do with logic or self-respect. Her friends couldn't understand it. From the outside, the answer seemed obvious. Leave. The situation is clear. The math is simple. Your life before this person was better than your life with them, so leave. But that calculation, as logical as it sounds, misses something fundamental about what was happening inside her nervous system. Because the question of why people stay in relationships that are destroying them is not a question about weakness or intelligence or self-worth, it is a question about neuroscience. And the answers, and when you understand it at the level it actually operates, actually does not just explain her situation, it explains one of the most powerful and least understood psychological mechanisms in all of human behavior. That is what we are examining today. Welcome to Dr. Cole's Dark Psychology. I'm Dr. Evan Cole, behavioral psychologist and behavioral analyst. On this channel, we examine human behavior at the level it actually operates, not the surface choices, the invisible neurological mechanisms underneath them. The psychology that drives what people do when they are in pain, when they are bonded, and when the thing that is hurting them is also the thing they cannot imagine living without. Today, we are going to examine one of the most psychologically complex questions in all of relationship science. Why people stay in relationships that are destroying them, not as a judgment, not as a self-help prescription, as a behavioral science question with a neurological answer that most people have never heard and that changes everything about how you understand this pattern. Let's get into it. When someone stays in a relationship that is visibly damaging them, the question most people ask is why? Why don't they just leave? Why do they keep going back? Why, when the evidence is clear and the people who love them are begging them to go, do they stay? That question, as natural as it is the wrong question, because it assumes that staying is a choice being made in the same cognitive space as other choices. The same space where you decide what to eat for breakfast, or which job to take, or whether to call someone back. It is not. The decision to stay, or more precisely, the inability to leave, is not operating in the rational decision-making centers of the brain. It is operating in a much older, much more powerful system, a system that governs survival, attachment, and the deepest needs the human nervous system has. And that system does not respond to logic. When someone stays in a relationship that is visibly damaging them, the question most people ask is why? Why don't they just leave? Why do they keep going back? Why, when the evidence is clear and the people who love them are begging them to go, do they stay? That question, as natural as it is the wrong question, because it assumes that staying is a choice being made in the same cognitive space as other choices. The same space where you decide what to eat for breakfast, or which job to take, or whether to call someone back. It is not. The decision to stay, or more precisely, the inability to leave, is not operating in the rational decision-making centers of the brain. It is operating in a much older, much more powerful system, a system that governs survival, attachment, and the deepest needs the human nervous system has. And that system does not respond to logic. This is the first thing that needs to be understood clearly before anything else in this video makes sense. The person who cannot leave a damaging relationship is not failing to make a rational choice. They are caught inside a neurological process, one that was designed over millions of years of human evolution to keep people attached to their primary sources of emotional survival. That process does not distinguish between a bond that is good for you and a bond that is destroying you. It only knows that the bond exists, and it will fight with every biological tool it has to preserve it. Understanding this changes the question entirely. The question is no longer, why won't they leave? The question becomes, what did this relationship teach the nervous system to need? And that question has a very specific, very disturbing answer. This is the first thing that needs to be understood clearly before anything else in this video makes sense. The person who cannot leave a damaging relationship is not failing to make a rational choice. They are caught inside a neurological process, one that was designed over millions of years of human evolution to keep people attached to their primary sources of emotional survival. That process does not distinguish between a bond that is good for you and a bond that is destroying you. It only knows that the bond exists, and it will fight with every biological tool it has to preserve it. Understanding this changes the question entirely. The question is no longer, why won't they leave? The question becomes, what did this relationship teach the nervous system to need? And that question has a very specific, very disturbing answer. In the 1950s, behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner conducted a series of experiments that would become some of the most referenced findings in all of psychology. He was studying how different patterns of reward affected behavior, specifically how the timing and predictability of a reward changed how strongly an organism became attached to the behavior required to receive it. What he found was counterintuitive and, in retrospect, deeply relevant to human relationships. The strongest behavioral attachment and the hardest habit to extinguish, the most persistent behavior, was not produced by consistent rewards. It was not produced by frequent rewards. It was produced by unpredictable ones. When a reward appeared sometimes randomly without a predictable pattern, the attachment to the behavior required to receive it became almost unbreakable. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, and it is the neurological engine behind why people stay. Here's how it operates in a relationship. In a consistently good relationship, one where love, warmth, and security are reliably present, the nervous system calibrates to that baseline. The good is expected. It becomes the background of the relationship rather than its defining feature. In a damaging relationship, one that cycles between periods of pain and periods of warmth, the nervous system cannot calibrate. The good is unpredictable. It arrives without warning after periods of coldness, criticism, or withdrawal. And that unpredictability produces something that consistent love never can. It produces a neurological response in the brain's reward system that is structurally identical to the response produced by addictive substances. The dopamine spike that accompanies the return of warmth after a period of pain is significantly larger than the dopamine response to consistent, predictable affection. The brain has, without the person's knowledge or consent, become addicted to the cycle, not to the relationship, to the relief of the cycle ending. And like any addiction, the thing producing the relief is also the thing producing the need for it. What Skinner described in laboratory conditions has a name when it operates in human relationships. Psychologists call it a trauma bond. The term was first developed by researcher Patrick Carnes, who studied the psychological attachments that form between people in situations of danger, unpredictability, and intermittent care. His research found that the combination of fear and relief, threat followed by rescue, pain followed by warmth, produced some of the strongest psychological bonds that exist in human experience. Stronger, in many cases, than the bonds formed in consistently loving relationships. And so this sounds paradoxical, and it is, but the neurological explanation is precise. The human nervous system evolved in environments where attachment to a primary caregiver was a survival issue. Infants and children who maintained attachment, even to imperfect, inconsistent caregivers, survived. Those who gave up the attachment when it became painful did not. The nervous system learned at an evolutionary level that some attachment is better than none, and that persistent, painful, unresolved attachment feels more urgent, more necessary than attachment that is safe and settled. This is the mechanism operating inside the person who cannot leave. Every time the relationship cycles back to warmth, every good day, every tender moment, every instance where the person they fell in love with reappears, the brain registers a reward that is disproportionate to the event, because the reward is not just the warmth itself, it is the relief of the pain ending. And that relief, neurologically, chemically, feels like love. It feels like proof that the relationship is worth fighting for, that the difficult periods are the exception, not the rule, that the person they see in the good moments is the real person, and the painful version is something that can be changed, managed, or survived until the good version returns. The brain is not wrong to feel this. It is responding exactly as it was designed to. What it does not understand, and what it cannot understand from inside the cycle, is that the good moments are not evidence that the relationship is safe. They are part of the mechanism that makes it impossible to leave. Most people outside the situation imagine that leaving is the obvious and straightforward choice. They don't understand that for the person inside the trauma bond, leaving does not feel like relief, icky. It feels like withdrawal. The neurological experience of ending a trauma-bonded relationship is not the experience of walking away from something that was hurting you. It is the experience of removing the only source of relief available to a nervous system that has been trained to need exactly that source. The anxiety is acute, the grief is disproportionate, the urge to return, to reestablish contact, to find a reason why it could be different this time is overwhelming and feels completely rational from inside the experience. This is why people go back. Not because they don't know better, not because they lack strength, because the nervous system in the early period of separation is in a state that is neurologically indistinguishable from acute withdrawal from an addictive substance. And here's the detail that makes this especially difficult. The person who left or is trying to leave does not experience this as addiction or withdrawal. They experience it as love, as the specific pain of missing someone irreplaceable, as evidence that they made the wrong decision, as a sign that what they had was real and worth returning to. That reinterpretation, turning the withdrawal symptom into evidence of love, is one of the most powerful cognitive mechanisms the brain produces. It is also one of the most consequential, because it sends the person back into the cycle. And each return, each completion of the cycle strengthens the neural pathway that makes leaving harder the next time. The bond does not weaken with exposure. With each cycle, it deepens. Over time, over months and years of cycling through pain and relief, threat and warmth, the trauma bond does something beyond the immediate relationship dynamic. It changes the person. Specifically, it changes how the person perceives themselves. The ongoing experience of being hurt by someone they love and being unable to leave produces a slow erosion of self-concept. The person begins to organize their sense of self around the relationship's terms, around what they have been told they are during the painful periods, around the explanation the relationship has implicitly offered for why the pain keeps happening. And that explanation in damaging relationships almost always points inward. The pain is happening because of something about them, because they are too sensitive, too demanding, too much, not enough. These are not conclusions they reached independently. They are conclusions the relationship constructed slowly over time through the accumulation of 1,000 small moments of being found insufficient. And here's the devastating irony of that process. As the person's self-concept erodes, as they become less certain of their own worth, their own perceptions, their own right to leave, their dependence on the relationship increases because the relationship has become the primary source of both the pain and the intermittent relief from it. They are less capable of leaving precisely because the relationship has made them less capable. This is not an accident in some cases, and even in cases where it is not deliberate, the effect is identical. A person whose self-concept has been systematically diminished inside a relationship will find leaving exponentially harder than someone whose self-concept is intact, because to leave, you need to believe that life outside the relationship is possible, and the relationship has been quietly, persistently making that belief harder to hold. I want to spend a moment on the people who love the person inside the trauma bond, the friends, the family, the ones watching from the outside and experiencing their own version of helplessness. They are not wrong to be concerned. They are not wrong to name what they see. And they are not wrong to feel frustrated when the person they love returns again to the situation they have just left. But the frustration and sometimes the judgment that accompanies it is based on a misunderstanding of what is happening. They are measuring the person's behavior against the standard of a rational, unencumbered choice. But the choice is not unencumbered. It is being made by a nervous system that has been neurologically conditioned to experience the relationship as a survival need. And the absence of the relationship is a threat to survival. Telling that nervous system to simply leave and implying weakness or failure when it cannot is the equivalent of telling someone in acute physical pain to simply decide not to feel it. The most helpful thing that people outside can do is not to increase the pressure to leave. Increase pressure, ultimatums, frustration, withdrawal of support when the person returns adds another source of pain to a nervous system that is already overwhelmed. And a nervous system that is overwhelmed falls back reliably on its most familiar source of relief, which is the relationship. Most effective support is the kind that keeps the door open without conditions. That says, I'm here regardless, I'm not going anywhere. You do not have to earn my presence by leaving. That consistency, that unconditional availability is the closest thing to a counterweight the nervous system has against the pull of the trauma bond, because it offers something the trauma bond never could. Relief that does not require pain first. People ask me this, and they deserve a complete answer. Can someone leave a trauma-bonded relationship and build a life that is genuinely better than the one they left? Yes, but the path out is not the path most people expect. It is not a single decision. It is not a moment of clarity that once reached makes everything straightforward. It is not a conversation with the right person that finally makes leaving feel easy. And the path out is a neurological recalibration. It requires, over time, the nervous system learning through repeated experience that safety is possible without the cycle. That warmth is available without the preceding pain. That attachment does not have to be earned through survival. That recalibration takes time, it takes support, and in most cases it takes professional help. Not because the person is broken, but because the neural pathways that were formed inside the trauma bond were formed over years, and they do not dissolve in weeks. What helps in the early stages, before the recalibration has had time to take hold, is understanding, and not the understanding of why the relationship was damaging. Most people inside the trauma bond already know that, and the understanding of why leaving is hard. When someone understands, genuinely understands at the level of biology rather than self-judgment, that what they are experiencing is not weakness, not failure, not evidence that they deserve what happened to them, but a neurological response to a process that was designed to create exactly this bond, something shifts, not immediately, not completely. But the shame of staying begins to separate from the fact of staying, and that separation, small as it sounds, is often what makes the next step possible, because you cannot find a way out of something you believe you deserve to be inside. If you are inside this, or if you love someone who is, the most important thing to understand is that the staying is not the story. The staying is the symptom. The story is what the nervous system was taught to need. What it learned about attachment, about relief, about Whether safety and love can exist in the same place at the same time, that story can be rewritten, not quickly, not without cost, not in a straight line, but the nervous system that learned to need the cycle can, with time, with support, and with the right understanding of what it is actually looking for, learn to need something else. Something that does not require surviving pain first. That is not a small thing. That is everything. If this gave you language for something you have been living inside or helped you understand someone you love in a way you couldn't before, then you are exactly where this channel is meant to be. Subscribe to Dr. Cole's Dark Psychology. Every week, we go beneath the surface of human behavior, into the neuroscience and psychology of why people do what they do when they are bonded, afraid, in pain, and trying to protect something inside themselves they have never been given the words to describe. No judgment, no shortcuts, no self-help prescriptions, just the science underneath the behavior. We'll see you in the next one.